Thank you, Igor, for joining us today. It's all about bows.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks.
All right, so Igor, tell me a little bit about what you feel as a professional musician that goes into a good bow.
Well, obviously it's very different for each person. A bow is perhaps one of the most personal things that a musician can have, a string player can have. Much like on a car, you can have the engine of the car in the instrument, but the tires, the performance is the bow. So the car can perform very differently with different sets of tires. And similarly, a violin can sound dramatically different with two different bows. So each person is different. The weight of their arm, the amount of pressure that they exert on the violin, all of that goes into configuration. And it goes into thinking about and picking out the bow that works for that player.
All right, so that's a good one. Now, we've got 3 bows today. The one in your hand is a gold-mounted heel bow. And then perhaps you might tell me how it feels.
Right. Well, at first touch, which can always and often be very deceiving because of the way that the bows are balanced. You can pick up a bow and think, wow, this is a really light bow. But it could be that it's just balanced so perfectly that you don't feel an amount of weight at the frog, or you don't feel it overbalanced to the tip. So first thing I usually look for is for the bow to be, as I said, perfectly balanced. In essence, it would play itself. You can just put it on the string, and you can start at the frog, and to the very tip, the amount of sound doesn't change. You don't feel like you have to compensate for the fact that you're away from your heaviest part of the bow. You're going to the tip. You don't need to press to sustain the same type of sound. That's where the perfect balance comes in. And then once you get a feel for what the bow can do, I try to find as many different colors with it as I can, just on a simple down or up bow stroke. It doesn't have to be anything flashy. Even just open strings often work very well because you're hearing the very pure sound of the violin without any additional vibrato or anything else. You want to check out the different parts of it, the frog, the middle, the tip, and to see how, at its most basic use, how it feels. So, feels quite nice, quite even. It doesn't take a lot of effort for me to play it, which is always a big plus because we want to make things as easy as we can for ourselves when we play. The next natural thing we want to do is to see how it bounces, because obviously not everything is long, straight tones. You want to find that perfect sweet spot in the bow where, again, this is something you want to start the stroke and let the bow do all the work for you by itself. So it seems quite easy to do that as well.
Let's try the other bow.
Okay, sounds good.
So the other one is Albert Nürnberger. It's an octagon bow.
All right, so again, first feel, first touch. This is kind of like the first glance when you look at your bride for the first time on the day of the wedding. What do you think? Right away, first feeling is it's quite thin, and that's because the part that I'm holding, the bit right over the frog, seems quite thin compared to the bow I just played. So it's one of those things that gives me a little bit of an uneasy feeling because as somebody with quite thick fingers and quite a thick hand, I want to feel like I can grip something and not be afraid that it'll break in my arms. Being quite thin at the very frog, it would probably have to thicken up as it goes away from the frog just to keep the weight of the stick within a parameter. And it does feel like quite a heavy bow, and if I'm just holding it, it does feel quite heavy in the center towards the tip. And so I'm noticing as I move it across the string, just around here, I start to lose a little bit of its own contact. So I feel like I have to add a bit of weight to sustain the sound. And that's, for my taste, for the way that my arm moves, that's something that I would not be very comfortable with, for example. Again, this is incredibly personal because you put 3 more people in front of this bow, and they will all have a completely different way of playing, completely different approach to sound production, and the weight of the arm, all of these techniques will make a big difference on how they feel about it. And that's why we have a different bow for every player. With its additional weight in the center, it does make it easier to play in the center. So it's a little bit easier to pull the rich tone out of the instrument. But unfortunately for me, it's mostly around the frog. As I get away from the middle, I really have to compensate quite a bit. Let's see how it bounces. For my taste, it's a little bit on the heavy side in the center. And again, as I mentioned, this stick does thicken out quite a bit towards the center. And for my heavy arm, this is a little bit on the heavy side. So that's something quite different from the one that we tried before.
All right. Okay, the third one that we have this evening is a Vigneron, Andre Vigneron.
All right. First impression, very light bow. Again, this in comparison to bow number 2, very light, very easy to maneuver, it seems. For my taste, it's a little bit light. Its heaviest part does feel in the lower half, and as I get closer to the tip, I don't feel the bow doing a lot of work by itself. I feel like, again, I have to do some extra work to get the sound out. And I think you can probably notice the timbre of the violin changes. This is a much lighter and much sweeter sound than bow number 2 with the heavier middle part. For my taste, the first bow had the best balance and the ability to pull out the richest tone while remaining even all the way through. As far as bouncing, very nice bow. For my hand, it's a bit light.
So I will assume that your first bow is your favorite one?
So out of these 3, the first one is, yes, it would be my favorite because it's the most balanced in each of the categories. Initial feel, overall weight, and most importantly, the balance between the tip and the frog. It's the easiest bow for me to play with. And that's something I would choose if I were buying a bow.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Igor.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed our invited guests who actually can share their important knowledge towards how they should choose a bow. On the 25th of March 2015, we are going to have our 2nd annual podium, and then this year we are going to talk all about bows. And our invited guests this year will be Mr. Yang Chin from New York and Ms. Chen Zhou from Singapore. TMX Podium, or also known as Tong Ming Xi Podium, is an annual event where we organize to celebrate the knowledge and experience, and we want to aspire musicians into greater heights. The first year was violins, And the second year, which is going to be this year, we're going to work on bows. So at this event, Mr. Yang Qin will bring together a couple of important bows, and Ms. Qian Zhou will actually perform on this bow and show us how these different bows would behave and respond to different actions. Hope to see you there.